decisions.
That was Minority Leader Chuck Schumer just in the last couple of moments reacting to that bill we've been talking about, Alabama passing a ban on almost all abortions overnight. 2020 contenders are also talking about it, both from the Hill and the campaign trail. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg just tweeting, the Alabama legislature is ignoring science, criminalizing abortion, and punishing women. Instead, he says, the government's role should be to make sure all women have access to comprehensive, affordable care, and that includes safe and legal abortion. We are continuing to get reaction, not just from Democrats, but Republicans as well. We'll bring it to you as we get it. Time now to look at what our sources are saying. Yamiche Alcindor and Anita Kumar here. Anita, let me start with you and some questions about, as we talk about what's happening on the campaign trail, the White House also talking about what's on the campaign trail and maybe getting into some hot water.
Right. So it is against the law, federal law, the Hatch Act, to politic, basically campaign for your boss while you're working at the White House or in the administration.
The Hatch Act.
Right, and there's a lot of talk about it because Kellyanne Conway just went on TV and kind of went off on Joe Biden. So people have accused her of violating this. So I went to see what the numbers say, and what they do show is that the number of formal complaints is way up since President Trump has been president, and there have been a lot of high-level, high-ranking people in his administration that have been caught violating the Hatch Act. But there's not much of a punishment. Basically, you mostly get a warning letter,
on the wrist.
and that's about it. Don't do it again.
Yamiche, you're talking about something I'm talking with senior officials about, this idea of a big immigration push. The White House, I know, has been working with Republicans to roll this out, but when we've asked senior officials about what about Democrats, the response is too early. Don't bring it up. We don't need to get divisive just yet. We're trying for a plan. What?
That's what my sources are telling me, that essentially the president's plan is to get solid support from Republicans that are still asking questions, by the way, and then at some point to share it with Democrats who are going to have wholly different ideas of what immigration in this country should look like. The White House is getting closer and closer to unveiling that. At one point, there was no formal timeline. It's looking like it's going to be closer, but there's still no actual timeline, but it just looks like it's closer than it was before. So we'll just have to watch out and see. But it's going to be interesting because Democrats are going to be, of course, presented with something that they had no input in.
And worth noting that this plan, which is two-pronged, right, a border security piece and then a merit-based points system piece that does not change the level of immigration numbers, legal immigration, it just changes the composition. Nothing on DACA in there, which may end up being a non-starter.
Nothing on TPS.
Yeah. Yamiche, Anita, love having you on. Thank you both for being with us. That does it for us this hour of MSNBC Live. Right now, much more with my colleague Craig Melvin in New York. Hey, Craig.
Hey, good to see you, Hallie Jackson. Good morning. Good morning to you as well. Craig Melvin here, MSNBC headquarters in New York City. Moments from now, President Trump on Capitol Hill speaking at the National Peace Officers Memorial Service. This happening as fears escalate of going to war with Iran. Also, Alabama lawmakers passed the most restrictive abortion bill in the country. Are we headed for a collision course at the Supreme Court? And Senator Kamala Harris wrapping up a town hall meeting in New Hampshire right now after announcing a new action to crack down on guns. We'll get to that in just a moment, but we start with President Trump's mixed messaging and credibility as well on Iran. Today, the United States has pulled non-emergency staff out of its embassy and consulate in Iraq. That, despite the president saying Tuesday he's not ramping up for war. Allies left in a bit of a daze. The New York Times reporting that foreign leaders appear skeptical of the White House claims that the threat level has increased. Likewise, the Washington Post reports, quote, lawmakers from both parties complain that the White House has not fully briefed them on the escalating tensions. We start with NBC's Peter Alexander. He is at the White House. Peter, is there an overall strategy here? Because a lot of folks are saying that it feels a bit ad hoc.
Yeah, Craig, it is a good question. Obviously, as has been reported in recent days, there were private conversations where the acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan presented to some of the national security officials of the president's this idea of having as many as 120,000 American troops able to go to that region. This was an updated military plan if they find that Iran is moving forward, accelerating its nuclear weapons program, or if there are some other real concerns as it relates to Iran in that region. The president, as we heard yesterday on this topic, kind of did both, pushing back on it, saying that that was fake news, that reporting, but also pushing forward, saying if there were a real concern, it would be a hell of a lot more than 120,000 troops, he noted. You know, in the past, though, obviously this idea was in part a function of his national security Security Advisor John Bolton, who we know has been a fierce hawk as it relates specifically to Iran and other nations around the world. The president said at times that he has to temper John Bolton here. But what's notable is we know where the president's position has been on this throughout, dating back to the campaign where he campaigned. His populist themes included this idea of pulling troops out of countries like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria. As it relates to what's been going on in Iraq, as you just noted moments ago, that partial evacuation of the embassy in Baghdad, we're now hearing from some Republicans, allies of this White House, expressing frustration that they have not been fully briefed on the circumstances behind that. Take a listen to Lindsey Graham a short time ago.
I would urge the State Department and DOD to come down here and explain to us what's going on, because I have no idea what the threat stream is beyond what I read in the paper. And I think there are a lot of people in my shoes that are going to support standing up to Iran, but we need to understand what we're doing.
To be clear, Craig, behind the scenes here within the administration, there really are some sharp divisions. Some people think we need to be much more hawkish.
They would if they could trust you down there on that end towards you releasing vital information that don't need to be released to the general public. They may do that, the State Department and the CIA and the Pentagon. But as of right now, they're keeping it under wraps.
Hawkish in this circumstance, and they sort of embrace what they've been seeing in recent days. Others are concerned that these are really scare tactics that are designed to send a message to Iran, but perhaps should be a bit more tempered.
All right, Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, joining the conversation now. Richard,
This is what's wrong with this country. Every time the State Department decides to make a crucial move, we get criticized by our own people. We get bashed. We get thrown under the bus. There's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. That's what the problem is over here in America. There's too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Pick up where Peter left off. This idea that this could be part of a strategy that this administration is employing, a strategy that we have seen employed recently in other spots around the world.
We saw this, or something similar to this in North Korea. We're seeing a hint of it with China. And North Korea is probably the clearest example, where you had tough rhetoric and tough tweets from President Trump, threats of war, threats of fire and fury, and then it led to negotiations, which so far haven't really panned out, but which did lead to a pullback from the brink of what looked like conflict. But there's a big difference here. No one really wanted a war with North Korea. Everyone was warning the president. Everyone that I spoke to within the military was saying this could have catastrophic consequences, with millions potentially dead in South Korea and in other places. It's very different here because, as Peter was just saying, there are several, including Bolton, who've been pushing for regime change for a long time. Also, several other leaders who have the president's ear, like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been pushing for strikes, military action against Iran for a long time. He wanted the Bush administration to do it. Bush said no. He wanted Obama to do it. President Obama went the opposite way and did a deal with Iran. President Trump broke that deal, and now Netanyahu is in a somewhat more stable position because he's settled his political future at home. Also, the Emiratis have been pushing for strikes against Iran for a long time, as have the Saudis. So it is not an analogous situation to North Korea, but it may be a similar strategy. And if it is, it does not mean you're going to have the same results, which I think we're seeing a lot of skepticism from European allies in particular. Spain went so far as to pull one of its warships from that flotilla, from that aircraft carrier battle group that the U.S. sent. Spain said it didn't want any part of this. It thought the aircraft battle group was going there to commemorate a naval anniversary, and suddenly it is now there as a show of force against Iran with talk of war and talk of consequences. So Spain said it's pulling out.
The two other assessments from our allies here on the threat itself, whether there is an actual increased threat from Iran. The German foreign minister today saying there is no concrete threat. On Tuesday, a British general working with American efforts to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria saying there has been no increased threat from Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria. Richard, who does believe that there is a threat from Iran?
Well, some of the people I just
We do.
Have this.
Didn't you read
idea
the
that
memo?
Iran needs to be contained, and it is a long trajectory. You have to look at presidential politics, at foreign policy over the series of several administrations. The same way there were people who wanted, Dick Cheney and others, who wanted a war with Iraq, and they saw an opportunity with the second President Bush, and they pushed that agenda. There were others who, going back to Iran, who wanted to topple the then popular Prime Minister Mossadegh. Going back generations now, the British wanted to do that for their own interests. And they tried. First, Roosevelt wouldn't do it. Truman wouldn't do it. And eventually, they found Eisenhower would. So you can have situations where there are those who are pushing for a foreign policy agenda and have to wait for different administrations, wait for different opportunities in order for their moment to strike.
Richard Engel there in London. Thank you. Peter Alexander at the White House. Thank you as well as always, sir. We turn now to Alabama. The state Senate there just passed the most restrictive abortion law in the country, effectively banning all abortions in that state, including in cases of rape and incest. Those performing abortions in Alabama could face up to 99 years in prison. So far, in all, Alabama has company. There they are. 29 states have introduced abortion restrictions so far this year. Joining me now from Montgomery, Alabama, NBC's Kerry Sanders, and in Huntsville, Josh Moon, a reporter and columnist with the Alabama Political Reporter. Kerry, I'll start with you. Just bring us up to speed if you can. What does this measure mean, and do we know whether the governor there is going to sign it?
We do not know whether the governor is going to sign it, Craig. She is a Republican, and she has not commented publicly, but all indications are the bill that was passed right here last night will be signed by the governor. She has 6 days to sign it. Now, currently, the structure in our modern times is still a little old school. They don't just email the bill to her. It actually has to be physically taken to her office. It has not been delivered to her office yet, as best we understand. The governor is not in her office right now. She is currently at an event which is completely unrelated to this bill. But what this law, if it becomes law in Alabama, will do, as you noted, will be the most restrictive in the country. Among the what some people believe should have been included, because there were amendments, were suggestions that there be exceptions for incest and rape. That was not included. It was debated right here on the floor, but ultimately it was not included. And another thing that makes it somewhat different from those bills that we have seen in other states is that while, for instance, in Georgia, life begins the moment a fetal heartbeat is actually detected. In this case, in Alabama, the law is what some would argue is nebulous on purpose, because it says that an abortion is restricted the moment a woman discovers that she is pregnant. So that would happen weeks or months, because it's up to each woman to determine with their doctor or on their own whether they are indeed pregnant or not. The reason those who wrote the bill did it this way, they say, is because they want to get it to the Supreme Court in the United States and have the Supreme Court, rather than legislators, determine the moment life begins. And so while you, as I pointed out, Georgia has a different version of this, their general belief is that this Alabama law, the most restrictive, is likely to be the one, Craig, that makes it before the U.S. Supreme Court for a determination, which is ultimately a challenge to the 1973 law Roe v. Wade.
Josh, let me bring you into the conversation here, and I'll share for our viewers and read for our listeners on Sirius Satellite Radio the headline from your column this morning. Stop telling people rather, that Alabama is better than this. It's not. Walk us through your take on this late night vote.
Yeah. First of all, the governor is absolutely going to sign this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a foregone conclusion here. This is a Republican plan. She's a Republican governor. They know what's going to happen here. This was all lined up well before this session ever started. No one in Alabama wrote this bill. The bill is way too smart for our people to have written it. That's where we are with this. This is all a ploy. This is all a ploy for us to get our name attached to some sort of a bill that possibly overturns Roe v. Wade. This is the dream of our legislators here to apparently force 12-year-old girls to carry rape babies to term. Why this is what we do, I don't know, but this is who we are. I mean, we have a number of people who continue to tell everyone, we're better than this. These people in Alabama our people care more and love each other more. It's just we've proved time and time again that that's just simply not the case. We do these awful things all of the time, and I'm sick of hearing people tell everyone that we're better than this. The fact is, our actions say we're not better than this.
What kind of local reaction is this ban getting in Alabama so far? What are people on the ground saying?
Well, I think that you'll have two different factions. You'll have a vocal minority, a very small minority of people who are outraged by what's taking place here. And, you saw a lot of them outside of the State House yesterday, and there'll be some of those. But the majority of this state is right on board with this. The majority of this state elected these people based on, in part, their pledges to go into to state government and overturn Roe v. Wade and protect the unborn. This is the reality of where we live.
All right. Josh, thank you. Kerry Sanders, thank you as well. I want to bring in Alabama Democratic State Senator Linda Coleman Madison. She is one of 6 state senators who voted against this plan. Senator, first of all, just your reaction to the ban. What will it mean for the women of Alabama?
Well, I'm appalled. I think it's a setback for the women of Alabama, not only.
She's appalled. Okay, she's appalled because it takes away the license to a freelance woman that wants to flaunt herself in front of her family members and basically, I don't want to go as far as saying asking for it, but it removes accountability on the part that women have been umbrelling under the laws now for quite some time. And some of these women get out here, some of them, not all of them, get out here. And once more, what we're talking about is one bad apple that has spoiled the whole bunch. Some of these girls has gotten pregnant as much as 3 or 4 times a year. That's had 3 or 4 abortions a year. For whatever reason, they didn't take the pill. They didn't do the contraception right. They didn't make all the proper preventions of not becoming pregnant, and they did. Okay? And they can get in the courtroom and they can scream rape. They can scream incest pertaining to a brother that decided to nail his sister, all they want. But the bottom line is this: they have stood under the umbrella of the laws of this land and basically allowed themselves to become nothing more than cold-blooded murderers. Cold-blooded murderers in this regard. These women that has 3 or 4 abortions a year. And the reason why that they're aborting the children is because it's affecting their careers or it's affecting their lifestyle. Well, was the law created for a girl or a woman to have purposely laid her back down to the point that she has allowed to become nothing more than a whore? And on top of nothing more than a whore, but it has basically allowed for the woman or the girl to become a murderer. Because anytime you take a life, you are not giving that life the same privileges as ordinary life towards being able to decide right from wrong, wrong from right, as either a child or an adult. And I realize what I'm saying right now is not going to look all that preppy whenever it comes to how women approach this situation or this particular topic. I realize that. But the bottom line is, why has so many abortion clinics popped up just within the past 25 or 30 years that basically gives a license for a girl or a woman to go get abortion after abortion after abortion? And I think what we're missing here is Alabama is making a statement. Their law enforcement agencies in their state capital is making a statement that enough is enough. And if you do an investigation towards how many abortions has occurred in the state of Alabama in the past 20 years, it will probably be mind-blowing to you. Not only in the state of Alabama, but in every other state of the Union here in the United States. I don't know if people know this or not, but women actually giving birth here in America has diminished. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last report that I got was about 30% in comparison to where it used to be, because women just don't feel like that they can afford a family, or they don't feel like that they're ready for a family, or they just don't feel like that it's time yet to produce a family, and because of it, they abort the child. They abort the child knowing that the child is supposed to have an opportunity of becoming an adult. And that very child that they're aborting may very well be the child that comes up with a cure for cancer, or a cure for AIDS, or a cure for whatever, towards saving society in that degree. I think the state of Alabama is making a statement to the rest of the country that enough is enough whenever it comes to these women being licensed of being nothing more than cold-blooded murderers on the behalf of them standing under the umbrella of the law that it's okay to abort a child. Now, you can get in front of a courtroom, or in front of a counselor, or in front of a judge, and you can scream and holler, rape, 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 all you want. But we know, regardless whether we want to admit to it or not, that a lot of these women bring a lot of these sexual perverted acts upon to themselves because of them dressing provocatively, either in front of various family members or in front of various strangers. We know this. Rather than them dressing appropriately, they dress inappropriately. And by them dressing inappropriately, they basically bring it onto themselves. Now, I'm not running for office, so I don't have to worry about losing votes in this regard pertaining to the women's lib and the freedom of women, in which there's no doubt, there's a lot of women out there that get taken advantage of, that get abused pertaining to the Me Too movement. There's no doubt. Because women are frail, they're not as strong as men, they can't defend themselves as good as men. They get talked into stuff that they shouldn't get talked into. They're naive a lot of times in the degree of some bad boy doing something to them that they never should have done to them. There's no doubt that that goes on too as well. So to be able to sift through the BS and go forward in the do's and the don'ts, the ticks and the tacks, the rights and the wrongs, Alabama has stood up to say enough is enough. We're putting an end to this type of abuse. And it's abuse in the system, as well as the abuse towards not being able to defy the difference between a woman's testimony of it being real or a woman's testimony towards it being made up. And whenever it comes to women in today's society not having a conscience of murdering a unborn, we are seeing more and more and more of proof in these regards towards them caring less about the empathy that they should have carried, but chose not to, out of a supersede conscious, subconscious choice. And because of it, the state of Alabama has put their foot down. And because the state of Alabama has put their foot down, now every free, liberal woman in the world is going to point their finger at Alabama and say, you went overboard. But has the state of Alabama actually went overboard? Or is it the system that has allowed for this idiocy to go on for the past 25 or 30 years the way that it has, towards escalating in the magnitude that it is right now, of seeing so many abortions occur here in America? Has the state of Alabama actually went over the line? Or is the state of Alabama trying to make a statement that enough is enough? And as I have said and said, and I'll say again, there's no doubt that there's certain women that get caught up in unpredictable situations, either with family or friends, in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person, and one thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, something occurs that the young girl or the woman did not intend to occur. But a lot of times, these occurrences was brought upon by her herself because of not following the proper signs, or just being too naive, or thinking that if something like this does occur, I can always reach out to the abortion law and I can get rid of this baby that I know I don't want to have a part of. So the system has been abused. The system has been abused, and the state of Alabama is saying enough is enough. Let's listen to the rest of this towards comments, and then I'm going to let this go. This is in Montgomery, Alabama. Please listen.
Of the whole United States. We fought so long for the rights that we have, and now these rights are slowly being taken away from us. But this is the most precious type of right that we have, the right to govern your own body and decide what you will do, and to make those decisions about your own health.
But you don't have a right to become a cold-blooded murderer under this law. And that's exactly what women have done. They have taken advantage of this law. And because one bad apple has spoiled the rest of the apples, now this is what you're getting slapped in the face with. And you can sit there and say whatever you want to say about this, but the facts stack up towards what I'm talking about in actuality is real. Towards too many women are crying wolf, and too many women are becoming cold-blooded murderers.
As I understand it, there was an amendment that you proposed that would have provided prenatal and medical care to mothers, but it failed. Why?
It did. Well, we say this bill is about pro-life. We say that it is about the sanctity of life and protecting and helping people to be grow up to be nurtured. This bill simply said that, okay, if you are going to force this woman to have this child, irrespective of the fact that all the issues about her mental state of mind or whether she would keep a child if she had been raped, certainly it takes a lot of support. So this amendment would have added the stipulation that if she is forced to have this child, the state would pay for prenatal care, give support to that woman up until age 13 of that child, and if prescribed by her doctor that she needs to have psychological or other medical care, that the state would provide for that. That was voted down in spite of the fact that you just said that you wanted this woman to be protected, you wanted justice for her, you wanted to give her support. That statement was made prior to me introducing that amendment.
If the governor signs this bill, as she is expected to do, according to our reporter that we just had on here from Alabama, what's the next step? How do you plan to fight this?
Well, right now, the fight is really going to be at the Supreme Court. We understand the intent of this bill is not about pro-life. It's about taking away the choice. It's really about control. And I'm wondering what's going to happen next. As we look at the Supreme Court, it goes there and the intent is to reverse Roe versus Wade. If that happens, then this becomes the supreme law of the land in the state of Alabama. And of course, every other state will be looking at Alabama's law and taking the pattern to pass similar laws. So this is going to be a constant rollback of other rights, slowly chipping away. But I think that there's a silent majority, a sleeping elephant, those women who believe in protecting their rights and protecting the rights of their children, in particular females. So it has unintended consequences that I don't think the sponsors have thought about.
Well, where were those women in Alabama during this debate? Why weren't they able to defeat this bill?
Well, we are in the minority. There are 4 women in the Alabama State Senate. I think there are 18 women in the House. So we are in the minority. We are a majority-led, male-dominated legislative body. Most of these bills that are introduced originally, when they first came down, they were introduced by men. Several years ago, we had the probing bill, all about the abortion rights of women, and this was introduced by a male. And the whole intent was that we want the woman to see what this fetus looks like. We want her to be probed. So I'm like, do you understand what no means? To me, this is rape again all over. And so it is a violation of a woman's rights. It is invasion of her body. And they were willing to strap her down and probe her to make her look at this infant on this screen.